despite everything else that we've been drawn into talking about, the students still love it. And you know what? The students don't care about any of this stuff. They don't care. They don't care about some kid going to make $1.5 million and driving a fancy car or wherever he's going to go get that chance. They just love their school. And that's a wonderful, I think, lesson for all of people like me to come back down and remember why we love this so much.
Welcome back, or welcome to Y Option. I'm your host, Yogi Roth, as always, joined by Jim Thornby. Week 10 is in the books. Week 11 is a big week, folks. We got not only great games, we've got the first CFP rankings reveal of the top 12. Also, I hear there's another piece of news that'll probably come out on Tuesday night, Jim, with the election. So with that, we're going to do what we've always done here, is be thoughtful. And as our friend on Substack, Dan Rather, always says, stay steady. So with that, Jim, how was your weekend? How are you feeling looking back as we begin to peak forward? You can't help but look towards what's happening on Tuesday.
Yeah, well, I battled some sickness over the weekend. Saturday was a little brutal, but we powered through. I think this is cup of coffee number 4 of today, just to keep us rolling through this one. So we're all good. But yeah, I'm more interested to know like what you got going on this week.
Yeah, well, I will take you through that. Let's just set the table for today's episode. My beloved friend and partner, Ted Robinson, joins the show. He's a lead voice of the CW. The CW, of course, is not only broadcasting ACC games. They've done that for 2 years, but this year they are Pac-12 games with Washington State and Oregon State. He'll be on the Palouse this weekend as Washington State continues to make that case for the CFP. So pending what happens on Tuesday, Ted will be all over it this coming Saturday night. But with that, we dive into all things current state of those two schools, his thoughts on the schools that departed the Pac-12 and much more. So that's coming up later.
Ready, set. Use French fries to go. Yeah, oil from French fries. Turn yesterday's leftovers into today's fuel. More power, lower emissions. 76 renewable diesel fuels all the ways you go, go, go.
Tell us why it's a great weekend, because Washington State didn't play a snap, but why was it a great weekend for the Cougs?
Yeah, it's funny, and it's kind of all these things kind of mixed together here. So you look at, obviously they didn't play, but we just mentioned Iowa State losing, mentioned Kansas State losing, Clemson losing, Pitt losing, even Texas A&M, Illinois to lesser extents on both ends of the equation there. So as far as teams that would have been or maybe still be ahead of them in these first CFP rankings that come out on Tuesday night, that margin is at least narrowed. Well, they're going to wind up being ahead of some of these teams now that they may not have been previous to this weekend. And then you look at, for their own resume, Washington beat USC, Texas Tech, which is going to be like a big win for them. They got one of those Big 12 upsets. And then Boise State continuing to ascend. Boise State is at the point now where they're going to stop being talked. I saw somebody like complaining on Twitter, is like, why does everybody in their pool keep putting Boise State as the 12 seed? Like, if they keep winning, they're not going to be the 12 seed. Like, they're going to be 11 or 10, or depending on what happens in the Big 12 and the ACC, they're going to be the 4 seed.
Yeah,
like that's not out of the question. But again, all that stuff is all good news for Washington State's resume, because as those 3 teams continue to win, the 2 victories over Washington, Texas Tech are going to look better, and the 1 loss to Boise State is going to look better. So, Coug fans, I know it's tough for you to root for the Huskies, but it's in your best interest to root for the Huskies as far as advancing as far as you can into the postseason, to get to the postseason.
Yeah, I'm so intrigued what the committee does around 12 best or 12 best bodies of work. I really just think it's important, right? Like, is it 12 best right now, and then you just credit USC's win over LSU which then does that discredit Washington's win over USC? And how does that impact Washington State's win over Washington in the Apple Cup? Like, they shouldn't be discrediting those, but we'll see. And then do they play matchups? Do they say, okay, well, how would Arizona State deal against SMU, let's just say, or Miami, or whoever, either wins or loses their conference title game? Because that's what we're really talking about, is a loser of conference championship games against the Cougs. That's going to be the debate. And then in the Big Ten and the SEC, because this is how it's going to go, folks, the 3 or the 4 team, because one of those leagues may get a 4th team in. I think it's pretty safe to assume they'll all get 3. Tell you what, I didn't have to hope, though, that Ted Robinson would be an elite guest. He's always special and dynamic and so informative. He's one of my dearest friends. He's also our guest today. Every one of our guests are presented by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. You might be going a lot of places now. We got basketball season heating up. We've got football season cranking up. We got the CFP. We have the election. And we got Ted Robinson, the perfect man for the job. This week, enjoy a conversation with a man who truly has changed my life. As we referenced, it is an honor, a great honor, and it was a great gift to spend so much time with Ted Robinson. He comes back to the pod. Ted, you know how I feel about you. I see that backyard. I wish I was with you right now.
We recorded.
Yes.
You recognize this setting, don't you, Yog?
Well, it was our first podcast together ever. We've done, hundreds since then, but it was my first year as a broadcaster with you. And you changed my life. I carry you every single day as a father and a husband, and every Saturday as a broadcaster. And now we get to have you on the pod, man. So once again, how you doing?
Well, Yog, it's great. I'm representing. I must say I watched probably most of the fourth quarter, a good part of the second half at least, of USC Washington the other night. And outside of the just surreal absurdity of seeing this game with Big Ten stuff all over it, where were you? The game was screaming for Yogi. So I have to tell you that. I say that with all intent to praise you, because it wound up being a nice and, of course, a terrific win at the end for Washington. But the game needed you, Yog. It was Pac-12 football.
Yeah, it really was. We had Nebraska UCLA, which was not Pac-12 football. It was like a great non-con game, right? We've seen that game before, right? Then remember Nick Pasquale and everything that they went after losing him as a teammate in 2013. I mean, there was some history there. But after the game, I drove to the hotel because you couldn't get out of Lincoln that night or out of Omaha, and tuned into, of course, the SCUW game. It's the only game on, at least that I was really interested in.
It's been awesome, even better than I thought, to be involved with the games that Oregon State and Washington State are playing on their home fields that are being televised nationally on the CW network, because it just reinforces what is wrong with the current state of college. We all know that. I'm not going to relitigate anything, but we understand the insanity of what's going on now. And to see the two fan bases of those schools kind of mobilize to support their teams, to see the facilities that both have. I live 3 miles from Stanford. Both Oregon State and Washington State's football facilities far surpass what Stanford has. Not even close. Washington State just opened a new indoor facility 2 weeks ago when we were there. It's beautiful. And now, of course, Washington State's play on the field is forcing them to be noticed, because everybody has ignored them. Everybody. It's been kind of distressing for me to sit back and see that there hasn't been a single entity paying any attention to the Cougs until about 2 weeks ago. And now they're starting to get a little bit of play. And look, they have their, to some degree, they control their fate. They have, I think they have 4 games left. 3 of them are very winnable. And the challenge is going to be the game against Oregon State in Corvallis. And look, if they win out, I don't know if they're going to make the playoff. I'm not even going there. But they're going to be in position to have a great bowl game and to be nationally relevant heading into next year.
Yeah, you laid out a beautiful case for the Cougs and what they've done. The Beavs have battled a bunch of injuries, and I want to dive into both those teams in a minute. But you referenced, you're the lead play-by-play guy for the CW. You're calling games whenever they're on that network. You and Ryan Leaf and Nigel Burton, who we've all grown to love over the years. What has the experience been like for you on those respective campuses in such a unique year where not only they're the two teams that are rebuilding the Pac-12, but then in real time, the league is also getting rebuilt in the
Yeah,
season.
yeah. The league. Well, okay. So to try to be brief here, the campuses have been great. I went to both campuses in August before games ever started. Oregon State did a major event for their donors, and it was great to be a part of and see the support that the Beaver Nation was giving Oregon State. I went up to watch a Washington State practice and spent an hour in Jake Dickert's office telling stories, and met John Mateer and had a chance to visit with him before a game has even been played. And it was a real good experience for me to get an insight into someone that is probably not in your great book, 5-star QB, because he wasn't that kind of quarterback. But you know what, John Mateer, Yogi, I'm ready for you. I'm stepping into Yogi's world. John Mateer has chutzpah. Okay?
Amen.
Okay? That's a nice way. I think everybody understands where I'm going here. But that's what John, and when I met John Mateer back in August, and just spent, 15, 20 minutes with him, I walked away going, I don't know if this guy, how he's going to play, but he's a leader. He's what you want in your starting quarterback. He's going to walk in and command people. He's a little bit of he has a little swag in him, which is good. Not too much, at least to my take. It wasn't too much, but just the right amount. And I'm really happy. I'm kind of weaving here, but what, to me, the difference this year between Washington State and Oregon State is two people, Jake Dickert and John Mateer. Jake Dickert stayed. Jake Dickert stayed. He didn't jump for a lifeboat, or what he perceived to be a lifeboat. We all know what happened in the other place. Jake Dickert stayed. Jake Dickert took a pay cut. Jake Dickert commanded, and through his, I shouldn't say commanded, but through his leadership, sold the rest of his football office. Everybody took a pay cut to save jobs because Washington State was having an across-the-board athletic budget cut. That's leadership. So as a result, what happened at Washington State? Virtually all the players stayed. Notable quarterback went for the cash. Okay, we know that. Most other people stayed. And then the other difference, John Mateer. John Mateer becomes the quarterback, and what John Mateer has done is led the Cougs to win even when they haven't played their best, which has been most of their games. But John Mateer has led. He's not the sole reason, but he's led them to win games. And Oregon State has struggled at quarterback. They just have. They can't win a game, Oregon State, because of their quarterback play. Mateer has won a couple of games for Washington State through his leadership and his play. And again, I hope that's an incredible lesson that other people around the country see, is that's the great part of both schools, is that both these schools have bred amazing loyalty.
Yeah, they really have. It's interesting. We had John Mateer on the pod last week, and he clearly remembered where he was ranked, 119th in the quarterback rankings. But it was different than a lot of the players, in my eyes at least, that are ranked low and then overcome everybody else's expectations or lack of. He doesn't seem to really care a lot about it. Like, we know that it's there, but he's got bigger things to focus on. And I think that's been the thing that I've noticed, Ted, from afar this season, is that last year it was like Cougs against the world, screw everybody, we're getting hosed, this is jacked up. This year, it seems like the focus is all on themselves. Have you felt that over the course of calling games there this season?
Yeah, they have. I think, look, both schools had the same mindset. It's just different circumstances. And you touched on it. Oregon State was ravaged. Oregon State was ravaged by coaches running out, by players going for cash, and left themselves thin in the offensive skill positions. Their entire identity was built around running the ball, which we've seen forever. Oregon State for 25 years has had a really good running game, and they had a two-headed run game until Colorado State. Jam Griffin got hurt, hasn't come back. Don't know if he went. We're in that world where no one tells you anything about injuries anymore, so I don't know if Jam Griffin's going to come back. But the two-head run game with physical play was their identity. They smashed Purdue with it, a Big Ten school. It just hasn't been the same since. And they're just thin. They can't afford on defense injuries that they've suffered. They just don't have the manpower. Even with that, the Bees have a chance to win 6 or 7 and get to a bowl game. Given what they lost, both players and coaches, that would be a wonderful achievement. And I think that's the way to judge the two programs. They come from different places. The foundation at Washington State stayed in place, even though and this is something that no one talks about. Washington State, off last year's team, 2 defensive linemen, 3 defensive backs in NFL camps.
Yep.
Okay, that's half your starters were NFL players, gone. They've had to replace them. And Washington State has struggled at times on defense, most notably against Ashton Genty. I mean, they couldn't tackle him. It was tough. They're not the only one, but that was a particularly rough game for the Cougar defense. And despite that, here they are sitting with 1 loss and a chance to play themselves into a significant spot in December, January.
Let's talk about a couple weeks from now. I believe you'll be doing it when these 2 teams face off against one another. What do you anticipate around the feel for this game? It's always been a competitive game, whether it's been in Corvallis or in Pullman, but now it's so unique of circumstances with the 2 teams playing football in the Pac-12. And I'm just kind of curious the vibe that you think will enter that game, because there might be some huge stakes if the Cougs continue to win, or the Beavs, to your point, are on the cusp of bowl eligibility.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the stakes could be much larger for the Cougs, but they'll be feeling both ways. Look, they're comrades in arms in one sense. Okay, so and they're going to be going head to head. They're playing twice next year. I don't know how many listeners know that, because next year is this odd year where the scheduling alliance with the Mountain West was gone. Bad decision by the Mountain West, and it's a year before the revived Pac-12 starts. So both teams have had to scramble to find games. They're going to play twice next season. But this game will have atmosphere. I mean, the Beaver students have been great. They're clearly going to want, it's almost like brothers-in-law playing against each other. They'll shake hands and hug at the end of the game. But for the 60 on the field, they're going to be going at it hardcore. And I've got to say, that's the other thing, and I haven't seen it. I've done 4 games so far, 2 at each school, and really haven't had that atmosphere yet. But there was a couple of weekends ago, Yog, when games ended. I think in 24 hours, you saw Dan Lanning get swallowed up by the students and Autzen, Kenny Dillingham going crazy after a win in Tempe, and I think it was the Boulder students. And by that time, Dion was back in his palatial office there, but the students charging the field. And I watched 3 of these in 24 hours, and I said, that's why we love college football, because that's still what happens. Despite everything else that we've been drawn into talking about, the students still love it. And you know what? The students don't care about any of this stuff. They don't care. They don't care about some kid going to make $1.5 million and driving a fancy car or wherever he's going to go get that chance. They just love their school. And that's a wonderful, I think, lesson for all of people like me to come back down and remember why we love this so much.
Amen. I mean, you think about like revenue sharing, which is going to be a reality here pretty quickly. Maybe that just brings everybody back down to earth just a little bit, because there is a relative potential playing field. So I want to ask you about like the teams that, left the Pac-12, right? Oregon sitting on top of the college football world today. Stanford in your backyard, as you referenced earlier, struggling. Cal has had highs and had a bunch of lows and tough losses. SC, I think they would be sitting the same position if they were in the Pac-12 as they are in the Big Ten, just because I think it's always has been competitive for them and they've been tight games at the end. But I'm kind of curious, as you've sitting back calling games on the CW this season, and you've looked at Dillingham do his thing, you've looked at Colorado, you've watched Utah not do what we thought. I'm wondering just your lens on those teams that departed.
Well, and honestly, I haven't paid much attention. I mean, I've noticed the scores and I read stuff. I haven't been able to watch very much. I've wondered a lot, especially in the last month, with the amazing work that Teresa Gould has done to rebuild and revive this conference. And it's the 5 schools that are coming in for football, basically the 5 best out of the Mountain West. And then Gonzaga was a home run. That when we spoke 2 years ago, Yogi, I hammered you in your ear about this. I said, if you want to make, and this is when the prior commissioner was in charge, and I said, you want to make a national statement, go get Gonzaga. I don't care about football. Just you send a message that you're still here. And Teresa Gould did it. And Teresa did it through personal contact, personal relationship. Awesome job. So, the vibe around reviving the conference is wonderful. And why I bring that up is it's caused me to think in the last month, I wonder if any of the people who ran have had second thoughts. Now, the first school that jumps into my mind is Utah, because I know, and you know, Utah didn't want that. Utah was a reluctant follower when a couple of other named schools bailed. And that's sad because they didn't want it. They understood. I wonder with who's coming back in this league, and particularly because the new league is on paper an outstanding basketball league. Utah has a great basketball tradition, which is not going to be served well by the league they're presently in. Despite and on top of the fact they're playing nonsensical games against schools in which they have nothing in common and the travel's crazy. We all know those things. But I wonder about the regrets. I was driving the other day and I listened a little bit to the terrific Brian Jeffries calling Arizona football at Central Florida. And I'm just laughing. I'm going, this is silly. I mean, it's just silly. It makes no sense for that game to be played. There's not one rational, intellectual argument anybody can make for that game being played, other than a random early season non-con game where you're doing a home and home, if that's something that moves you. But as a conference game, it's absurd. And so, anyway, it's caused me to wonder if some of the schools would have second thoughts. I live, as you said, I live in the shadows. People know of Stanford. I worked there for 13 years. I'm going to their basketball openers, both men and women today. I'm going to take my granddaughter to Cape Pay's first game tonight. Nobody can say anything yet, but their football's been pounded. I looked at their Stanford baseball schedule. They have 5 separate trips to the Eastern time zone, March, April into early May. No combo trips, no 2 series on one trip. 5 separate trips to the Eastern time zone. So it does not take an advanced degree to sit there and think, how long is this sustainable? And I won't make any predictions other than to say I don't think anything can happen. For example, I hear it all the time in Pullman and Corvallis. Boy, you think Stanford and Cal will come back? Not now. They have to let this play out. And I think we need a body of work from the existing athletes, who in the case of Stanford and Cal are still students, by the way, to come back and say, we tried this and either, yeah, it worked, it was a struggle, but we made it work, or we tried our best and it doesn't work. And that to me will take 2 years. And then I think we could possibly see some revision of what on the surface appears to make no sense.
Yeah, I think the brilliance behind what Commissioner Teresa Gould did, Ted, in my lens, is if you comp, let's just take Oregon out of the mix, right? They're always going to be, I think, an elite program. But if you start to say, okay, if the Pac-12 in 2 years is the best, call it, non-power league, traditional power league in terms of what the Big Ten and the Big 12 and the ACC and the SEC have historically stood for, and that winner is going to go to the playoff, the conference champion. I got to think that like Washington State, if we were playing it out right now, well, they have more appearances than 70% of the teams that left. And what is the value around that? If you have one appearance in 5 years, right? We know how many times that Pac-12 teams were in the 4-team playoff. We'll see how many get in this year. Oregon, of course, in the driver's seat. But it'll be something, of course, that history will tell us on. I want to ask you a question about a guy that we loved as a historian. I got to be your partner for a long time. You also had Bill Walton as your partner for a long time. Both of us adored sitting next to you. It's Bill's birthday on Tuesday of this week. You referenced going to a basketball game with your granddaughter. Bill loved basketball games. You've sat next to him at thousands of games, probably, if you count them back in your career, definitely hundreds. But what are your thoughts this week as basketball begins? We celebrate his birthday, but no longer will your beloved partner be sitting next to you calling games.
Well, look, Yogi, it's what, May? This is November now, so it's coming up on 5 months, and it's still stunning that we lost Bill so quickly from mid-February when I was having dinner with him at a restaurant in Eugene, the last game he ever worked. And then 3 months later, that Bill was gone. I spent some time over the weekend recording some pieces for a Pac-12 Insider Fast channel that is still existing on your Samsung Plus TV, but is going to honor Bill by re-airing a lot of Bill's Pac-12 telecasts through the years, which is a great thing. But what I ended up telling were some stories about my dinners. It's almost like the Andre thing, my dinners with Bill probably 100 to 125 of them over 12 years, very few of which ever consisted of any conversation about basketball. And one story I didn't tell, which is relevant because, as you said, as we speak, Tuesday night is Bill's birthday. It's also election night. And it's pretty emotional in our country right now. No matter where you come down on things, it's emotional. The last dinner that we had with Bill with our core television crew was the night of COVID. We were in Las Vegas doing the basketball tournament. Of course, the world was stopping on our phones as we were calling games that night with Rudy Gobert, Tom Hanks, NBA, blah, blah, blah. So we finished that first night's games and we go to dinner and we're not sure what's going to happen the next day. And we went to dinner and Bill and Lori, Bill's wife, arranged this dinner and there were probably 6 or 7 of us there. And within minutes, the conversation turned into this debate about the Electoral College and the validity of the Electoral College. And it wound up being Bill and Michael Molinari kind of taking the opposing positions about the legitimacy and the validity of the Electoral College. And I just loved it because it was what I experienced a ton with Bill that some of our other crew members had that chance to see. We sat there for probably an hour and a half and there was 2 minutes of basketball conversation. And it was all about the world. And that summarizes Bill. And the other point very quickly is that I did say this the other day. Bill, we all knew you're younger, so you probably didn't have as much of a chance to see it. But, someone like me, Bill was the greatest college basketball player I ever saw. Larry and Magic just a shade behind. Bill was a great teammate. I've heard that from everybody. His UCLA teammates I've met, his Portland Trailblazers teammates I've met, the Boston Celtics teammates I've met. They all say that about Bill. Great teammate. He was a great teammate for all of us in television. Phenomenal teammate. His greatest teammate of all, Lori. And it was amazing to see how much he leaned on her and how strong a rock she was for 30 plus years of marriage together, helping raise Bill's kids, grandkids, helping Bill through the deteriorating pain he suffered through, and then his rebirth back into life and becoming this, character that everyone knows as a broadcaster. That's the other thing. Greatest teammate in Bill's life was Lori.
Well, you've been one of the greatest teammates in my life as well. And, Bill impacted so many, as have you, Ted. And I appreciate you coming on, man. I don't want to keep you too long because I want to make sure we bring you back again, okay? I don't want to wear out the welcome,
Well, yeah, I'm sorry because podcasts are too long in general, so I rambled. But I hope that I live long enough to say the same thing about Amy with you in another 25 years.
Amen. Amen, brother. Hey, lots of love to your family, your incredible wife. Enjoy the hoops game. And let's hope it's a celebratory week on a bunch of levels, starting with basketball and Bill Walton. Lots of love, man. I miss you.
Thanks, Joe.
It's the Afterglow. That was Ted Robinson. As always, every conversation we have here at Y Option is presented by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. Jim, your takeaway from a conversation with my longtime partner and lifelong friend.
Well, it's always great to have, his perspective on things because he's been around the game, for so long. The part that stood out to me, I think, obviously, is the conversation about Bill Walton and just, how much it meant to him. But also it was funny, like when we finished the interview, I asked him because, just the other night, me and my wife were watching, just flipping through the channels, and A Few Good Men was on, and I totally forgot. I knew this fact before, but blink or whatever the whatever blinking with your ears is, and you'll miss it. Ted Robinson's voice is in A Few Good Men. Probably halfway through the movie, as he's, his Tom Cruise character loves to watch baseball. He's watching an Orioles Twins game, and you can hear Ted calling, broadcasting the game and talking about former Orioles first baseman Randy Milligan. It's for you baseball nerds like me. So just a fun fact. And he told us off air, just about, that experience, and not even knowing that he was in the movie, like that they used that until someone he knew called him after the fact to tell him about it. So that's probably my favorite Ted stories.
Oh, he's the best, man. He does so many things like that. Like you're watching, NBC, and all of a sudden it's a Joe Montana documentary and there's Ted. you're watching Netflix and there's like a tennis documentary. There's Ted. Like, he's so humble and he's so kind and he's so talented. If you want a fun listen, go way back. It's probably like 7 years ago. Had him on the podcast and really got to learn a lot about his story and how his story got going in broadcasting. I mean, he was, that rock star 26-year-old calling Warrior games and A's games, then eventually Giants games, and then Twins games and Mets. Like, he really has a beautiful story, and he really has poured into me in so many ways around the craft of broadcasting, but also the art of being a father and a husband amid the craft of broadcasting. I'm so glad we got to have him on. And I'm so glad for Oregon State and Washington State, you get to still have his voice on all of your broadcasts. He partners with Ryan Leaf and Nigel Burton. They'll be on the call this weekend. Washington State, they got a fun one at home against Utah State. And I know Utah State a little bit. Jim, we had them against USC. I think it was week 2 of the season. So that will be a competitive game. They'll bring their very best in that regard up to Pullman, as will Ted and company on the broadcast. A big happy birthday to Bill Walton on Tuesday of this week. I loved your point, Ted's conversation around him and the impact that he had around all things life, not just all things basketball. So everyone will be thinking about him. We'll be thinking about the playoff, surely be thinking about the election. So with that, the way we began it, Jim, I'm going to end it. No matter where you are, what you're doing this coming Tuesday, stay steady. Peace.